Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the KONTAINEROZ podcast. The podcast is sponsored by PortPro, the leading operating system for drayage carriers. Schedule a demo today at portpro.io, and don't forget to mention KONTAINEROZ for 10% off. Today we got Matt Schrap in the studio on a second visit. Today we're discussing all things clean truck related, as much as we can cover. And we're just going to get right into it. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Luis.
Thanks for my coffee.
Cheers.
All right, finish this sentence. December 31st, 2022 is the last day for
2007 through 2009 engines to continue legally operating in California.
the whole state, not just the ports.
Not just the ports, the whole state. There are exemptions that people can apply for. You get a 1,000-mile-a-year exemption. You can get special ag provision exemptions. You can get a low NOx counties exemption, which is like some of the upper Northern California counties. But you have to apply for it. It has to be processed by the ARB. But otherwise, if you got a 7 through 9 engine, it's pretty much all bets are off. Registration will be denied in 2023 if it hasn't already. And, you know, you've got to turn that truck over one way or another.
Is there a website where they can go look at each of those exceptions or exemptions? Which is it?
Unfortunately, for these, because there's a couple different things. So you have the exemptions within the rule itself, and you can try to go to www.arb.ca.gov, which is the ARB's website, and search their truck stop, or just put in ARB truck stop into Google or Yahoo or whatever search engine you're using, and it'll bring you to what the ARB calls the truck stop. And then you can navigate through the different rules there. They do explain some of the exemptions. They also explain how to get the exception for the DMV registration, because they communicate through their databases back to the DMV if somebody has a valid exemption that they've applied for and had approved. So that's probably the best place to get it. You get it straight from the source. We have a few resources up, but for the most part, the state's going to be the clearinghouse of that.
It sounds like a lot of digging you got to do.
Yeah, ARB, we've always, I've been doing this close to 20 years dealing with the Air Resources Board, and they leave a lot to be desired when it comes to outreach. They'll send a postcard in the mail to any registered truck and saying your truck may be out of compliance at the end of this year. They'll send letters. They try to do outreach webinars. I mean, they do these webinars at, 10 in the morning on the middle of the week, which is difficult for someone who's operating a truck to take part in a 3-hour webinar, that's populated with a lot of, folks who are selling equipment or trying to come up with some new better mousetrap for compliance. So you don't get a lot down to the brass tacks, and the stuff can be confusing, man. It's overwhelming. Sometimes I read this stuff. I've been reading regulatory policy, like I said, for years. And sometimes I'm just like, what are they talking about? So, we try to be as proactive as possible with education, and, I'll chime in on some of the, on the KONTAINEROZ site when I can, if somebody's kind of getting a little too far over their skis with thinking they're, interpreting ARB rules. And I just want to make sure everyone has the right information, because ARB does not do a great job at it.
What about grandfathered in? Can you explain a little more about how that comes into play?
Yeah.
And would that apply to the newer models that will be allowed?
Exactly. So the statewide standard in 1123 is 2010 engine, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you have a 2010 engine model year, and it's important for folks to check, because I've seen 2012 trucks across many OEMs that they have 2009 engines in them. So even though you got a 2012 truck, you go pop the hood and look at the engine tag, it says 2009. And so if you have a 07 through 9 engine, you're out. But if you have a 2010 engine, then you basically have up until the useful life kicks in to have to start reporting that truck, and then eventually take it out of service once it reaches those useful life thresholds.
How does that happen, the mismatched years?
I mean, each individual OEM, sometimes depending on who the customer is, it's like a lot of times some of the largest fleets
Yeah.
that they will work with an OEM to say, especially in the early generation of that stuff, when the first, DEF and SCR came online, you had larger fleets who went to OEMs, and the OEMs had leftover engines still from 2009 that they would basically build into that truck. But since the truck year it would be 2011, if it's a 2010 truck, they have to brand it as a 2012 model year truck, even though the engine's older. So they don't, it's more of like a special kind of exception as opposed to the rule, but it can happen. So it's important to take a look at your engine tag to make sure you know what engine you're running.
Because my truck was still allowed, well, some of that year would not be allowed to be brought in during this lifespan.
Yeah.
Because mine was grandfathered in. That means I couldn't, but the minute I sold it to someone else, they can't register it at the ports, right? That's kind of like what it protects from.
Keep
it with
bit.
the same owner.
Yeah, right now the way the new rule is written, it prevents you from doing that. When I talk to the folks at the ports, they tell me that as long as the VIN exists in the drayage truck registry in LA Long Beach, then you can sell that truck to somebody else and then still be allowed to operate. Now, this is what they say. They say that you can swap VINs out, but the new rule, the Advanced Clean Fleets rule, prevents you from doing that 100%. So you wouldn't be able to sell your grandfathered in truck to somebody as soon as they adopt this rule, which is slated for October 27th. As soon as they adopt that rule, essentially it's got to go through some, Administrative Procedures Act stuff. Once it's in effect, then more or less you do not have the ability to sell that truck to somebody else to give them the grandfathered.
So basically 2023 moving forward, right? Because that's when you need 2015s and up only.
LA Long Beach has a 2014 truck entry standard.
Okay.
So after, I think it was October 1st, 2018, where they said any first-time VIN entrant into the DTR has to be 2014 model year truck. And it can get confusing because the state goes on engine years, but the ports down here have a truck model year. And the reason why they did that, from my understanding, is because in that 2014 truck model year is when the greenhouse gas standards, I think for phase 2 EPA greenhouse gas, went into effect, and the engines are equipped with more sophisticated onboard diagnostics. So that was their motivation, to say if we're going to put new trucks in, we want them to be the latest standard, even though the PM and NOx criteria pollutant control is the same from 2010 engines all the way through even 2022 diesel engines that you're buying today. So it can get confusing.
I'm confused.
Yep, right, exactly. So 2014 truck, LA Long Beach for first-time VIN entrance. But if you had a VIN in prior to that October 1st date, 2018, that was a 2010 engine, 11, 12 engine, you're good until that useful life reporting kicks in.
But that means regardless of January 1st, 2023, those are out?
If you got a 2010 engine, you're okay. So 2010 engine's kind of like that threshold, even for
Wait,
the
what?
ports.
I thought so that truck right there would have still been good past.
If it's got the 2010 engine in it, then yeah. 1123, the statewide standard is 2010. So as long as you're in the DTR with a pre-2014 truck before October 1st, 2018, then you're good. If you want to enter in a truck right now, it's got to be 2014 or later, and then you're still grandfathered in because it has a 2010 or later engine. So that 2010 engine standard, with DEF or, advanced SCR, whatever, or advanced EGR, you still have compliance because that engine was built to 2010 EPA and ARB standards. So you're good. If you want to enter in a truck today, it's got to be 2014 or later in LA Long Beach truck model year. Everywhere else in the state, Oakland, Stockton, Hueneme, San Diego, wherever, any other ports, you're good with a 2010 engine or 2011 truck, right? As long as it has a 2010 engine in it.
I say that's a bunch of fucking bullshit. I'm upset right now because this sounds like a lot of numbers, a lot of... Who the fuck has time to keep up with all that shit? If it's a matter of like like let's say a crime, it's illegal to do something. It's illegal across the whole fucking board. It's not like, in this county you might get away with it if you did it before 6 p.m. I could stab a motherfucker in the morning and it's okay. But like why aren't they all on the same page? That's really frustrating, man.
Yeah. LA Long Beach has always been more progressive, and the statewide rules basically allow the port authorities to set more stringent standards. LA Long Beach is the only one that has a more stringent standard than anywhere else. And, no one had challenged it at the time because, it's still a diesel engine standard. You can still go purchase that truck used. It's tough to, challenge some of the clean air standards because you get demonized as being like an environmental racist because you have disproportionately impacted communities of color who suffer exposure to diesel particulate matter that basically need their health protected. And so the ARB passes the rules. You come out against them. The environmental justice groups and community groups are saying, like, your truck is killing me. Even though, I talk to a lot of drivers, man, they all live in the same communities. They put their kids through college. They're, feeding them, clothing them, housing them. And it's just not good enough because people feel like this exposure to diesel particulate matter, despite everything that's been done in the trucking industry to control those emissions, it's never enough. And that's why we're moving into this whole new horizon of zero emissions.
Then again, people of color, this is what I've heard already. Like, for example, Latino couple, they are owner operators. They want to get electric trucks.
Yeah.
Dealers and lenders don't take them seriously. So that's something else there too.
Right.
Like,
yeah, the state is putting together a financing program for zero emission trucks specifically. And it really depends on the lender that you go to, because some of them work with the state right now in this program known as the California Capital Access Program, where a lender will have a portion of the loan basically subsidized by the state of California, where it's put into this reserve pool that a lender can use to mitigate their own risk. So they have a reserve pool that they can draw from if the loan goes bad. So there's lenders out there. We have some as members of HTA, like Crossroads Equipment Lease and Finance, really tries to work with some of those smaller fleets. But man, the electric truck is a tough road to hoe because those trucks are $350,000, $400,000, $500,000.
Then again, maybe they're misinformed to a degree where they think they got to catapult all the way to zero emission.
Right now,
and maybe word on the street and whoever their circle is saying that. So we need to get the right information out there.
Absolutely.
So these people don't take those drastic leaps, and that increases the odds, of making it as complicated as it is right now to make it out here for small business, right? So
California is a very unfriendly business state, right? I mean, it's no matter what business you're in, there is a tremendous amount of downward pressure on small business, especially. They pay a lot of lip service to this, the state does about helping small business people, but they make it very difficult. It's expensive. The weather's nice out here, right? As I always say. So people like to stay. And, the state, their perspective is, well, if you go away as a small business, some other business will step into your role and, pick up the slack, so to speak, whatever it is. And unfortunately, it's not that cut and dry for people who have roots here, who have mortgages, who have kids in school. Mm-hmm. You can't just pick up and leave to Texas. It's not that easy. So it makes it challenging. But like you said, it's all about education. It's all about making sure people have the right information to make those informed decisions.
Yeah. By the way, I don't think they want us in Texas, but you saw that billboard?
I haven't. I saw Gavin Newsom's billboard in Florida saying, come to California. We'll take it. But yeah, it's again, it's not just as easy as picking up and moving. There's this big push right now for zero emissions, and the zero emission truck isn't really the hardest part of the equation. Electric vehicles have been around for a long time. The heavy stuff, there's a challenge there because you got range anxiety. The trucks are much heavier than their diesel counterparts. So that just means you haul less payload, which means just more trucks on the road to move the same amount of cargo. The charging infrastructure is where the problem is. There's zero public-facing charging infrastructure right now. and the state expects fleets to install their own charging infrastructure. And yeah, there's incentives out there, but a lot of these firms down here locally, especially, they don't own the land that they're on. They've been leasing either short-term or long-term from a landlord who's like, wait, you're going to tear up my parking lot to put a bunch of charging infrastructure in? Plus, you got places like the city of Carson that is putting a conditional use permit in, or they're considering it, which would prevent any existing warehouse from expanding their operations if they're going to park more trucks or stack containers. And
they're not very trucker friendly. There was
they are not trucker friendly, no.
A fuel station that wanted to open up there, and they were not granted that opportunity.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because everybody relies on trucks so much. I mean, for those of us in the industry, we all know that, if you got it, a truck brought it, right? Yeah. You'd be naked and hungry without trucks, as it's been said. And people just, they just see them big and ugly, and, they take up room, they mess up roads.
Don said something on LinkedIn. I saw it. It was like, doctors deliver babies. Mm-hmm. Everything else comes in the truck.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, and they wouldn't even be able to deliver the babies without the trucks, right?
Yeah.
Because all the medical equipment, all the, the pharmaceuticals, the gowns that they're wearing, the PPE, everything is all bought by a truck. I mean, there's people, I think, understand it a little bit better now after the pandemic and seeing how important truckers are. But, it's like not important enough to be prioritized for vaccinations, not important enough to, be recognized for the hard work that they're doing. I mean, I will give this administration, the Biden administration, credit for being much more proactive about engaging the trucking industry, highlighting the importance of the industry. I mean, granted, there's always going to be political challenges, but
I'd say it's just a timing issue. Whatever fucking administration would have been there would have had no choice but to address it. Otherwise, it just seems like faulty leadership. So
when there was 109 ships at anchor, in January or whatever it was, like, it's impossible to ignore. And if you ignore it, it just builds up, right?
You're gonna catch some shit.
Yeah, right.
End up being a meme.
Right. Yeah.
When will diesel trucks be kicked out completely?
So this is where it can get even more complicated, Luis, right? There's this provision, as I've referred to, useful life, right? So back in 2017, I believe, the part of SB 1, which also raised diesel fuel taxes, one of the trade-offs with the industry was to say, okay, if we're going to start paying even more because the highway fund is broke, they need money to repair roads, they've been pilfering money from the highway fund for years to support general fund budgetary programs in California. So they needed money. Our infrastructure is crumbling, got to put more money into it. The only way to do it is really through diesel fuel tax. So part of the trade-off was to say, all right, well, if you're going to raise our fuel taxes, there has to be some consideration for equipment that's out there right now to be protected from the ARB just coming in and basically performing a regulatory taking, as it's called, where you say, well, too bad, so sad, your truck's out of compliance, like, beat it. So the provision known as useful life, I think the code section is Health and Safety Code section 43012 or something like that, or 21. Oh, I don't know it off the top of my head, so it's not that impressive. But, like, it says, okay, if you have a truck that's in service in California, any rule that's passed after 2017 needs to take into account useful life. And what that means is you get a minimum of useful life on an engine that's in compliance. So it's not the 7 through 9 engines. It'd be a 2010 or later engine, right? Because that's the statewide standard, and it only applies to rules written after 2017. So the on-road truck and bus rule and the drayage rule date back to like 2006, 7, and 8. So they said in those times, 7 through 9 engines, 2023, they're out. But any new rule passed after 2017, SB1 said, okay, you have to take into consideration useful life, which means 2010 engine, you have a minimum of 13 years of useful life on the engine year. So, right, so 1/1/23 would be when it's within its useful life window. What the new rule says is that come 1/1/25, you need to, if you're grandfathered in, like we were talking about, right? Either you have that 2014 truck in LA Long Beach after 1/1/18, or you have that 2010 engine before 1018 that's been grandfathered in. Come 1/1/25, the state of California is going to expect any truck in drayage service, and that's across the state. So this is a statewide rule that includes all the maritime ports as well as intermodal rail yards.
Everything this time.
Everything that is intermodal related. The trucks that don't do intermodal or drayage have a different rule set that they have to deal with. But for drayage, it says 1/1/25, you, Mr. or Mrs. Truck owner, need to start reporting your mileage through the database, right? And there's another provision, there's the inspection and maintenance rule, which is basically the diesel smog check, which is going to require you to report engine performance information 2 times a year starting next year. So they are going to not only require you to report into the drayage truck registry, mileage, model year, name, rank, serial number, but they're also going to require you to report your engine performance data if you have a 2013 or later engine that has this advanced onboard diagnostics, let's call it. The advanced onboard diagnostics will tell you exactly how many miles that engine has. So there's really no way around needing to report, but it starts 1/1/25, right? So if I have a 2010 engine, 2023, it's 13 years old. 2024, it's 14 years old. 2025, it says, okay, now you need to start reporting. Even though you turned 13 and 23, the rule says it starts 1/1/25 to report. So you report your mileage in 1/1/25 by I think February 15th or something. By that date, you need to report your mileage. If you're under 800,000 miles, then you can continue to operate that 13, 15, whatever year old engine.
But you still got to be doing those things.
You still got to be reporting.
Okay.
Right? So you got to report as soon as that turns 13 years old. So the rule says, okay, 2023, you're still in compliance. 2024, you're still in compliance. But come 2025, if you report and you're over 800,000 miles, they basically boot you out of the DTR. If you're under 800,000 miles, you continue to report. And what they say is that you start reporting when the truck's 12 years old, the truck model year is 12 years old, but that typically means the engine's going to be 13 years old because the engine's typically 1 year older than the truck model year. Because just like we buy today, if I want to go buy a new truck, good luck, right, trying to find one out there on the lot. There's very few stock trucks these dealers have. But if I bought a truck today, it would be basically a 2022 engine in a 2023 model year truck. So when the engine turns 13, truck turns 12 years old, you start this reporting, 800,000 miles, you're out. Starts 1/1/25. They move you out. If you're under 800,000, you report then the next year. Still under 800,000 miles, you continue to report, and as long as you're under 800,000 miles, you're okay until the engine turns 18 years old. So you have these two bookends. You got 18 years or 13 years, and then in between it is 800,000 miles. So if you're under 800,000 miles at age 17, you're okay. But come the next year when that engine turns 18 years old, doesn't matter if you have 200,000 miles on it, 18 years old, you're out.
So it's like a little sequence, right? There's got to be a either or, whichever comes first type of deal.
Exactly. But it starts on 13 years old. So you're okay. If you're under 13 years old, you're okay. Even if you have 1 million miles and you're less than 13 years old, you're okay.
Oh, then that's beneficial too, because
yeah.
a lot of guys are buying trucks that have been over the road, and they already buy them at 600,000 miles and up. So,
and we kind of know in drayage service, it's it depends if you're local or regional. You're 40, 50,000, maybe 60,000 miles a year if you're not coming from Arizona or the Valley, then Central Valley, that is. Then you have a few years, even on those higher mileage trucks, before you're going to get to 800,000. But as soon as you hit 800,000, once that engine's 13 years old, up to 18 years, then they're going to boot you out of the DTR.
And is there someone that enforces it and comes to take a physical look at the odometer? Or you know what I mean?
It's an honor system, so you have to basically, they'll likely require you to report either a photo of your odometer. You'll need to possibly supply 90-day inspection reports that have the odometer written down.
They always have to stay up.
date.
They have to match all the time.
Exactly. And so, you got people who have replaced dashes, right? Clusters, where you get a new odometer. They're going to base it on the vehicle miles that are whatever that odometer says. But if your odometer says 100 miles and you have a 13-year-old truck because you just replaced the odometer, then they're going to go default to the engine and whatever that engine ECM basically is telling you, or 90-day inspection reports.
I smell a lot of creativity coming.
Well, the ARB's been doing this long enough that they kind of know these tricky ways for people to get around the stuff. And sometimes, man, I tell people look, you're going to spend so much time and energy in trying to subvert the law that you're almost just better off spending that time and energy in trying to replace the equipment. Because the other thing too, and which is unfortunate, but as soon as this rule passes, it will absolutely prevent you from repowering to a later model year engine, because it's based on vehicle miles. It's based on the original equipment that was built into that truck at time of production. So even if you went and got a brand new 2022 engine today and put it in, it would not be in compliance when the rule basically starts requiring that reporting. And I know people have repowered, and it's unfortunate because it gives you statewide compliance, but just not for drayage service.
Huh. Give me a second here. I had something related to that.
Sure.
Kind of about the repowering. That question was, can a trucker keep the old truck but upgrade a newer engine instead? And so there's that answer, huh?
Yeah, no is the short answer for drayage service. And again, drayage service is
all models, all years?
Every mod, doesn't even matter. Doesn't matter what the truck model year is, doesn't matter what the new engine model year is. If you want to go into drayage service, they will not allow that for compliance pathway.
Why not? I mean, if the engine, if you could find a way to certify that this meets the standards,
yep,
it's just like the heart of the operation. That's what,
I'm hearing you, man. And the motivation is to move the drayage fleet to zero emissions really before any other segment in California. Even the light duty passenger vans, and light, medium, heavy, the package delivery trucks that we all see in our neighborhoods every day, they don't have as an aggressive as a schedule as the heavy drayage trucks. And it goes back to this health risks, exposure for sensitive receptors.
Man,
it's tough. I'm telling you.
I would see a 1995 Peterbilt in the ports. Mm-hmm. And it had a 2009-10 engine in it. Yep. So that I wouldn't be able to do that again in this time around.
No, and in that situation, you wouldn't have until 1/1/25 where you need to start reporting. Granted, it has to be a 2010 engine, right? Because the 7 through 9 guys, no matter what, you're out. But if it's a 2010 engine or later, and come 1/1/25 when you need to start reporting, that's when the jig is up, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And, ARB has the ability to put registration holds on. They'll send you a letter that says basically you need to prove to us what engine year you have. Not to mention the marine terminals are responsible for more or less enforcement of this rule, which the ARB is basically providing them with police powers, let's say, to reject non-compliant vehicles. For those non-automated gates, right, because LA Long Beach is a pretty sophisticated marine terminal complex. It's a lot of automated gates, a lot of auto in-gate. Places like, Stockton doesn't have auto in-gate. So it requires somebody to determine whether or not that truck meets the in-use standards for drayage trucks. Then they need to report that information to the ARB. And if you're on that list, then you're going to hear from the ARB one way or another. And of course, they're at weigh stations, right? And CHP will flag you in if ARB says that truck looks suspicious or if it's smoking, flag it in for additional inspection. And if they find that you have, you're pulling a container and you have a bill of lading that says whatever on it, and it's from Shanghai or wherever it's from on the other end, they're going to look at it and they're going to determine whether or not that truck's in compliance or not. And whether I haven't heard as of yet of the ARB forcing CHP to put a non-compliant truck out of service on the spot, but you're definitely going to get the citation and likely some type of registration hold. Because people, we're clever, right? We're a can-do industry, but ARB's seen so many people try to circumvent the rules that they've set up every contingency plan that they can think of to prevent people from doing that.
Man.
Yeah.
One last question about the 800,000 mile rule. Like, so what happens if within those miles the engine has been rebuilt many times? That it doesn't void it out, or what?
Rebuild is okay, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not repowering.
Okay.
So if you keep rebuilding, that's okay. Now I would say that you want to keep that truck registered actively, not putting it on non-op.
But does it reset the miles now? Because now
they're going to go off whatever the odometer says.
Then the other thing will take over then the 13 years or
exactly.
Okay.
So, you have, you got an 800,000 mile engine right now. You do an in-frame, you get it rebuilt. It's okay because that engine year is not going to change. Your mileage, again, it doesn't matter if it's been rebuilt. It's whatever that odometer says. And again, you replace the odometer, it's going to raise a red flag with the ARB, and they're going to do some further investigations. Now, whether or not they show up at your house or wherever you've registered your truck remains to be seen. I wouldn't put it past them necessarily, but they'll find you eventually. Mm-hmm. So that's why they want people to report the mileage on their truck, and they're going to look at it and scrutinize what these mileage reporting is communicated to them. So you in frame, you're still at 800,000 miles, but you don't need to start reporting until that engine turns 13 years old, beginning 2025. So, right, I got a 2015 engine, turns 13 years old in 2028. 1128 is when I need to start reporting. I got a 2010 engine, even though I turned 13 in 2023, the reporting doesn't start for everybody until 1125.
Yeah, okay.
So you get a couple years that even though you've hit that initial useful life, you get a couple years before you would have to start reporting. But once you need to start reporting, even if you in-frame that thing as shiny, sparkly, brand spanking, rebuild, out if it's over 800,000 miles.
Okay.
And so they'll just boot you from the DTR, and then especially down here on the auto in-gate or in the automated gate, they just basically ping the statewide DTR to make sure you're in compliance. And so if you've been booted out of the DTR, in theory, the marine terminals will not let you enter into their property to pick up boxes because you're not meeting the standards.
So overall, someone with a truck like 2009,
Mm-hmm.
that 2009, 2010, that's going out on January 1st.
Basically 7, 8, or 9 engines. So 2008 truck, 2009, 2010 truck, yeah.
And it's grandfathered in. What can they do on January 1st? Are they really fucked?
So you got to remember that there is zero consideration for somebody who has a 7 through 9 engine that hasn't tried to get this September 1st purchase order consideration. Come 1/1/23, they're out. It's 7 through 9 engines. And so that's why it's important. I always tell people, if you're not familiar with your engine tag, you need to get familiar with it like right now.
Yeah, I think there's a issue there with the model and the, you know what I mean, the make and the...
Right, because the truck year's typically 1 year newer than the engine.
Check that stamp
Check
on
that
it.
stamp, okay. Exactly. If you don't have an engine tag, it's like a $300 fine from the ARB right away.
Okay.
You have to go to the OEM that is, certified to do repair on that particular engine, or a mechanic shop or whatever. Typically, you go to a parts counter. If you got a Freightliner, you go to the VVG dealership over in Carson. You order your new engine tag. They'll install it. It ranges in cost because it has to be installed by the dealer or by that certified mechanic for the new engine tag. And that's basically what they determine. I mean, because, man, I've seen engine tags from that vintage 7, 8, 9 engines that have been power washed off, or even the stamp has been rubbed down that you can't really make it out. It has to be clearly legible and visible to any inspector, and that's how they determine. It's got your engine family number on it, which is more or less what the OEMs use to determine levels of emissions controls. But what the ARB looks at is just the year. 7, 8, or 9 engines, they're out. The only caveat is if you went to a dealer, put a purchase order in, deposit whatever that dealer requires, they give you a purchase order, a legally binding purchase order contract that's dated on or before September 1st, right now of this year, so like 2 weeks ago or whatever. If you have that, then you report it to the ARB. They will allow you to run your old 7, 8, or 9 engine until that new truck delivers.
Okay, what if, let's say I give a down payment to do that, right? I'll give $5,000 down or whatever to make that order.
Yeah.
I just bought myself a...
Until that new truck delivers, yeah.
Yeah, but what if when it delivers, then I just cancel and I just paid the $5,000 to buy myself time? Allegedly, I'm just saying.
Right, exactly.
You know what? I don't want it after all, but I'm thankful that I used my truck an extra year and I made my 150, my 170K.
You will, right, exactly. So you will lose you'll lose the deposit, obviously, and that would just be a conversation with the dealer. Yeah. As far as the ARB is concerned, they would come back and say, well, why didn't you take the truck? And it's like, well, because whatever. For whatever reason. I'm leaving the marketplace. I realized, I can't afford it. Or
have they thought about scenarios like that?
Oh, yeah.
I bet, huh?
Yeah, but they're putting it back on. That's why they say it's legally binding. But it's going to be up to the dealer to determine what the boundaries of legally binding means.
Yeah.
Because if a dealer's kind of looking at you sideways when you're coming in and, they aren't necessarily convinced that you might take delivery, your deposit's probably not going to be $5,000. It's probably going to be like $20,000.
Ah, there you go. Okay.
So they want to make it where,
because
dealers don't want us to be sitting on trucks. Yeah. But I hear where you're going. But first of all, you have to find a dealer who's going to give you an order in the first place. Because right now, it's still kind of reeling from the semiconductor shortages, still reeling from kind of these outrageous prices. You have OEMs that have prioritized these large orders from the big guys that, if you go to a dealer, you're like, man, I need to place an order for a truck. They're like, we literally, as a dealer, have been limited our allocation from the OEM to say, like, I can't even place an order as a dealer with the OEM. So they're not going to allow you to place an order with the dealer because the dealer can't place an order with the OEM. I mean, we have fleets, and again, HTA, we have fleets of all shapes, sizes, colors, whatever. I've got guys who are multi-generational trucking companies. Their grandfather started it. Their dad ran it. Now they're doing it. Go to dealers and say, I need 20 trucks. I got 20 2007 through 9 engines. Dealer's like, I can only give you 5. I can only give you 10 because I don't have enough order slots with the OEMs to build all 20. So it doesn't matter. And plus, they want you to come in with approved financing from somewhere. A lot of times they want 20% down, which with a new truck, today, those things, I've seen the purchase orders. We're talking $180,000 for a new truck these days or more.
$250,000.
Exactly.
With COVID rates. And now I wonder how they're doing because those rates are not the same.
Prices have been coming down a little bit on the, the retail truck side, but nothing where it was pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Like you said, $250,000 out the door after FET and sales tax for a brand new sleeper configured diesel DD13, DD15, whatever, automatic DT12, nice truck, $200,000, easy, like no problem. And so you got to finance that, and the finance company is going to look at whatever they feel that truck value is, and then they might come back and say, well, we need even more money down from you. And so it's challenging. Like, I feel for people out there right now, man. I wish there was something we could do. We have a lot of dealers as sponsor members of HTA, and we try to promote them to say, hey, look, go talk to these guys. They kind of know the market. They understand the challenges you're under. We have a couple finance companies that will help. But it's a matter of taking that step because, like, as you and I know, a lot of people wait till the last minute before they start doing something. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. And then it's too late because everyone else is waiting till the last minute, and the dealer's like, I don't have any trucks for you.
So who profits in these regulations? Like, because the small biz seems like they're the most affected. So do you think that's like a tactic to push them out?
Man, on its face, it sure does feel like it. Of course, the state of California will never admit that. And what they say, who profits or who benefits from these type of rules are those people who are exposed to diesel particulate matter that it impacts their health, right? So they say that we're gonna save money on the healthcare system in California because now there's less asthma, there's less cancer even because there's not as much exposure to diesel particulate matter. So that's how they justify a lot of the rules, is because they have a health savings that goes along with it for those people who would be disproportionately impacted by exposure to emissions from the goods movement sector. But the businesses, you got three choices: pass it on to your customers, suck it up, absorb the costs, or go away. Those are pretty much your three choices.
Yeah, because there's not really much. There may be some, right? Like, for example, organizations like HTA that are trying to help, but there's not really much like transition assistance for these guys trying to comply. You know what I mean?
You still got to spend money. I mean, I'll tell you, in my previous role, I did a lot of grants for small fleets, for diesel replacement. Yeah. And I'd go and talk to some of these folks, and I'd be like, look, this is the last year that you're going to get money to replace your diesel truck with another diesel truck. 60 grand you could get for a new diesel vehicle. I'm going to wait. They can't do this, right? They'll never be able to do this. It's too expensive. What happens when all the trucks stop? I'm just like, look, man, yeah, I get it. We all know that trucks are an integral part of the economy, that support everything in this state wouldn't function without trucks. But it's kind of this mentality like, either waiting till the last minute and then all the diesel to diesel grants go away. And the only thing that's available to you is this financing program through the state of California, which is still a loan that you still need to pay back, that still requires some level of down payment. So there's some support out there for replacing with diesel. It's a non-starter right now outside of that finance program. All the grants now are for the low NOx, CNG, LNG, natural gas engines, right? Or zero emissions, battery electric or hydrogen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the big companies that can afford it, they're complying easy, right? I've never seen this before. Like, what could be a customer is a carrier now. Like, I saw Living Spaces trucks. Mm-hmm. You've heard of Living Spaces?
Yep.
They got their own fleet.
Yeah,
and chassis.
Chassis too, right? Exactly. Yeah.
That's crazy. Like, that was someone's customer at one point.
Right, and they just create their own private fleet.
Wow.
Right, and because it's easier for them to control costs, and plus a lot of people. I mean, AB5, as we kind of spoke about before, it's like, now it's in effect, but I mean, it's been around since the Dynamics ruling, which goes back to 2018, right? And so people have seen the writing on the wall, and some of these customers say, look, I can't gamble with my supply chain. I'm just going to suck it up, and we're going to go buy trucks and find drivers and buy chassis because they don't want to deal with the pool. And they just kind of, go through the motions that way. So, yeah, it's interesting to see that because these private fleets, they're, they want to try to support their own operations as much as possible. And if they can get around it by ordering a lot of diesel trucks. I mean, right now, every month when I look at the DTR statistics, there's more and more trucks being put into the drayage truck registry to get ahead of that 1/1/24 date, which basically after 1/1/24, you can't put anything else into the DTR statewide unless it's zero emissions. And people putting tons of diesel trucks into the works.
Yeah.
So they'll be in there. You got to visit the port one time a year to maintain eligibility or a covered facility. But, they're putting more. Just from July to the current, I think there's 1,400 more trucks that have been put into the drayage truck registry.
And the main contributors to that growth are which type of carriers?
I feel like it's the larger, especially asset-based guys.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to look out for the little guys, man. They're pushing us out, man. From my opinion, but
yeah, I'm hearing you, and I feel the pain. And when I talk to folks, I'm like, look, you have to be proactive, because if you're not, if you just expect like, there's no way they can do this. Like I've heard that so many times, even going back to the first iteration, in the ports when in 2012 it was supposed to be, everyone's supposed to be 7 through 9 engines. This is kind of Clean Trucks 3.0 mostly at this time. Yeah. Right. But even back then, they can't do this to me. There's no way. Yeah. Well, they did, and they're going to.
Yeah.
And unless someone sues the ARB over the new Advanced Clean Fleets rule, then this is going to be the law of the land.
Will owner-operators with 2015 and up see a spike in rates? 2023, do you think?
I would,
Or 14 and up, my bad.
Yeah,
Whatever the
yeah.
ideal year is to have.
I would venture, you know, and as a nonprofit association, we don't get into rates because it's antitrust, right? But one, rates have come up, is my understanding, since the pandemic. But if we just kind of think about supply and demand, if we're talking up to 20% of or more of the full container moves that are done in LA and Long Beach are done by 2007 through 2009 engines. If you remove 20% of the capacity overnight, basically, supply and demand, if there's less supply, demand goes up, as do prices. And so customers, you know, these shippers, it depends, you know, if you're a onesie, twosie container a year because you're doing snow globes or something or whatever compared to like, you know, thousands of containers of tennis shoes or what have you, then your pricing is going to be different. But everyone knows this is coming. This has not been a secret. And so if you're a compliant owner operator right now or a small motor carrier under AB5, then your expenses relative to maintaining that vehicle, I think, should be commensurate with the rate that you're getting to operate that vehicle.
That you said it right now, overnight. So are the terminals or e-moto, whatever, I don't want to say held, would they be held responsible, but is it up to them to impede your entry? Let's say I have the truck that's not compliant on paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
January 1st, 2023.
Yep.
And I still pull up and attempt to take my load out. If they let me enter and complete my transaction, are the terminals aiding me to...
Yes, and that would be then their responsibility to ARB.
They don't want to take on that, right? So they're gonna cut us off. Like
they're gonna ping the DTR, and if you're not compliant in the DTR, more or less they'll red light you, or they'll give you a trouble ticket to go trouble, and they'll say, "Look, you're out of compliance. You got to get out of here." Yeah. But if they allow you to operate, pull a can out, then theoretically now the way the rules work is they're on the hook. They're supposed to report that information to the ARB that they let you in, and then possibly face citation from the ARB for allowing you to enter into the property. Yeah. So from that perspective, they don't want to because A, it's easier to do it automated. Ping the DTR out of compliance, you're not coming in.
But how will they brag about their TEUs moved?
Right. Well, we'll see. When 20% goes overnight, you know, that's why we need to get more productive. And in my conversation with the marine terminals, you know, the terminals, they're in the middle of a lot of things, right? Between the BCOs, the ports, the lines, the unions, the truckers, they're kind of just in the middle. Sometimes equipment breaks down, right? Sometimes their TOS goes down. Mm-hmm. Sometimes labor isn't available or they didn't hire enough gangs, whatever it is. Turn times are still, you know, averaging 90 minutes. You're still talking about 25% of the turn times are over 2 hours. We need to get way more productive if we're going to lose 20% of the capacity overnight. You can't, you know, even though they're putting more trucks into the drayage truck registry, it doesn't mean that that truck is attached to a driver. It's just a VIN to have that kind of padding to say, okay, well, if I need to go in, especially the asset-based guys, like, okay, that truck's out, you're going in this truck, here's your truck for today. So we need to get way more efficient because, you know, I see the reports. There's still dudes who are sitting down there 7, 8 hours. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, it's not uncommon. So how am I supposed to move 20 million TEUs? And again, 70% of all the cargo that comes through is moved by truck. It's only 30% that's rail, and rail has their own issues right now, obviously, on dock. But we need to get more productive. And hours of service constrain drivers from, you know, driving over the allotted time. And plus, you know, they can open up Sunday gates all they want to. When I talk to drivers, they don't want to work on Sundays. They want to spend time with their family. You know, they want to do some extracurricular activities. We're all still human beings here at the end of the day, man. And if you do a weekend day, typically you got to burn a day during the week in order to comply with that hours of service. And so, you know, there's no shortage of challenges, but we're going to have to figure out how to get more efficient and productive, and that is going to require buy-in from every stakeholder in the maritime container movement. If they want to keep up that volume, even though a lot of it went to New York, New Jersey, and Eastern Seaboard right now, it's going to come back.
Yeah, it will for sure.
It will, because there's 30 some odd ships outside of Savannah. You know, they only have a couple berths there. BCO's shippers aren't going to stand for that for long. They tried to get ahead of the ILWU contract. We're seeing a softening in consumer spending, but I mean, you can only take so much. 30 ships in Savannah or wherever, 27 ships in Houston is like having like 200 ships at anchor here in LA Long Beach.
How do we get that information to know where any amount of ships it is at any given time? Is that public information?
There's a couple
somewhere?
places. So the Marine Exchange here in LA, and for Long Beach as well, they're based right here in San Pedro. You can go and can subscribe and get weekly updates to daily updates about how many ships are en route, how many ships are within the 40 nautical miles to 150, how many are within 40 nautical miles, how many are at berths. But one place you can look at it is at the Port of LA's website, basically their cargo operations dashboard. There's one icon there that's like, I think it's just daily operations report. You can click on that and it'll bring up like a PowerPoint slide PDF that says, here's how many vessels are within 40 nautical miles. Here's how many are at berth. Here's how many are within 40 to 150 nautical miles. Here's how many are from point of origin to the 150 nautical miles. So you can look and see, and right now I think it's just above 50 total that are from point of origin all the way to LA Long Beach. And that's because of the queuing system that the Marine Exchange and PMSA put in effect, because having 109 ships at anchor where everybody and their uncle can see, like you said, people asking you, I'm sure, like, oh, you're in, what's going on? Why are there so many ships out there? It's complicated, but nevertheless, we will never see that many ships in eyeball sight of, they're hiding behind Catalina, they're sight. Floating down in Mexico, right? Out of sight, out of mind, right?
Yeah. Oh, man. Look, that's a lot of information to take in. So we're almost out of time. On the way out, can we end it with just a quick little run it by me one more time?
Absolutely.
The truck requirements to work the ports. Like
today, unless you're grandfathered in, okay? Come 1/1/23, 2007 through 2009 engines on 1/1/23 will more or less be denied access to marine terminals in California. They will, or intermodal rail yards. And you will have your registration denied by the DMV in 2023. 7 through 9 engines, basically, they're on the chopping block, they're out. Now, there's some confusion because you can technically sell your truck in California, even though it's non-compliant. You can sell it to someone else in California, as long as you give them a disclosure that says this truck may be subject to rules in California. Now, how you register that non-compliant truck is a whole nother process. But on its face, 7 through 9 engines, done. 2010 and later engines are in compliance.
And later, what do you mean by later?
So like newer.
But
so
then you said 2014 and up to go in.
For first-time VIN entrance.
First time, okay.
So if I want to put a truck in the DTR right now for service in LA Long Beach, 2014 model year truck. If you have a 2010 engine that's already in service and has been in service since before October 1st, 2018, you're good. You're in compliance with the 2010 engine, okay? Even though the first time VIN entry standard, if I want to go buy a truck right now, I just found a 2014, I can put it in because it's 2014 truck model year. I can't put in a 2010 engine right now, just LA Long Beach. Everywhere else, it's okay. LA Long Beach says 2014 truck model year if you're a first-time VIN entrant.
But if you're already in and you're in 2010,
you're good.
Now you fall under the 800,000 mile rule.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Or the
useful life.
See, it's making more sense, okay?
You just got to keep chipping away at it. Right?
I like how you're going through the years,
Man, it can be confusing. Like we were just saying earlier, it's truck model year in LA Long Beach, but it's engine model year everywhere else. Rule of thumb, 2014 truck, LA Long Beach, first time VIN. Everyone else has 2010 or later engine, newer, you're grandfathered in until you need to start reporting, as the rule is currently proposed, on 1/1/25. Then you now need to start reporting your mileage, okay? If your engine is 13 years old, come 1/1/25. So I'm a 2010 engine, 1/1/25. I'm a 15-year-old engine now. 2010 engine, 2025, right? You're great at math, but that's 15 years. So you're above that 13-year threshold. So they'll say, now you need to start reporting. If you're over 800,000 miles, when your first reporting requirement kicks up, then you're out of the system. If you're under 800,000 miles when your first reporting threshold starts, you can continue to operate until you get to 800,000 miles or that engine turns 18 years old. So it's those bookends, 13 years, 18 years, 800,000 miles in between.
So is this time frame correct, 10 to 14, or is it 10 through 13?
10 through basically any engine model year. Right?
For the grandfathered in ones.
Grandfathered in. If you're 10 through 13,
okay, 10 to 13.
You're in. That's
Can
engine.
I sell it to another party?
The only caveat being is as it is right now, according to the ports, and the only way to figure this out is to try it, right? But from what I've heard from them, is that if the VIN is in the DTR today, and it's grandfathered in, that you can sell that to somebody else and they can operate it because that VIN is still in the DTR. But when the new rule goes into effect, when they adopt the new rule and they determine it to be in effect, you cannot do that anymore. It's only original owner. So those 10 through 13 engines, those are grandfathered in. But so are 2014, 15, 16, 17. Any engine model year that's currently in the DTR today is good to go.
Okay.
You're good. If you're in the DTR right now or you want to put another engine into the DTR, you're okay. With the caveat that if it's LA Long Beach, it's 2014 or model year truck or later if you want to put one in today, right now. So say for some reason, I want to jump into the drayage business. I need to have a 2014 truck to go register it for the first time in LA Long Beach.
There you go.
If I've been operating here, I'm good to go. I'm grandfathered in, but I got to start reporting 1/1/25 if my engine is 13 years old in 2025. So like if I'm a 2016 engine, right? I wouldn't have to start reporting until 2029. Because at 2016, add 13 years onto that engine, 2029 would be when I need to start reporting. But if my engine's 13 years old in 2025, 14 years old, 15 years old, right? Because a 2010 in 2025 is going to be 15 years old, but it started that clock ticking in 2013.
I'm just fucking nodding my head, man. Like, yeah.
Right. Oh,
you know
man,
what came to mind right now? That movie Numbers, and I just saw a bunch of,
just numbers
like,
fucking moving around in the atmosphere. Right, I'm hearing you.
Is it a myth that you lose your grandfathered in status if you fail to pay the clean truck fee? Which no one reminds you what day it is. It's up to you to know.
It's up to you to know. Is
that true though? You
lose your If
There's
you're
no grace
not
period?
active, I haven't heard of one. If you can go to them and say like, look, so blah blah, whatever happened, maybe they'll make case by case considerations. But on its face, if you're not active, which means your registration is up to date, your clean truck fee is up to date. As soon as you start blowing that off, you're out. Basically.
You lose that grandfathered.
You will lose that grandfathered in.
And no one said that before. Like they want you to like not know. I think.
And LA Long Beach has, again, their standards are different than Oakland. You got to pay the normal DTR for the statewide. It's like you just need to make sure that you're continually operating and you're reporting any changes to your fleet to them statewide, because it's intermodal rail yards too. And the intermodal rail yards, if you're 80 miles away from a maritime port or do more than 100 truck trips per day, then you're an intermodal rail yard per day on average over a month. You're an intermodal rail yard. You're subject to the same exact rules that someone coming into a maritime port would be. So you can get grandfathered in across the state. If you have that 2010 engine, you're good until you need to start reporting. And when you start reporting, and that's 2010 engine, 11, 12, 13, even up to 2022 model year engine, when that 2022 engine turns 13 years old, needs to start reporting.
Okay, all right. I don't want to take any more of your time. I know you're a busy guy. I see you everywhere
all day, man. We could sit here all day. And I appreciate what you do, Luis. Honestly, you do a great job of trying to get the word out there, brother. And
I hope I did these questions justice, like, because a lot of the answers come if the question is good.
right, you know what? That's
it's
funny
like-
you should say that, because one thing that the ARB, in having had dealt with them for so long, one of the things that they say, and I've had conversations with them before, is that, well, but you told this truck operator this. Their response is typically, well, they didn't ask the right question. Okay, so you need to ask the right question to get the right answer, and you're doing a good job asking the right question. But it's it's drinking from the fire hose without a doubt. And I'm happy to come back anytime. We can see what the feedback is, from some of the followers once we put this out there.
Yeah.
And if there's more confusion, we can do it. Maybe we look at doing like an in-person meeting somewhere. I'm happy to come out and explain it.
Yeah, a little
Happy to
clean
chat
truck
more.
workshop.
Exactly.
Let's do it.
Exactly.
We'll shake on it right now.
All right, I'm in.
All right.
I'm in.
And I must admit, I had some help from the followers for these questions.
Right on.
Good. So good
Good.
job, guys.
Right on.
And all right.
Keep it up, man. And I'll tell you, one thing we have is our Trucker Advantage program with HTA. You go to our website, harbortruckers.org or .com. You can sign up for the TAP, Trucker Advantage program.
Mm-hmm.
It's free. You get in there. We have a marketplace for TAP members. You get 25% cents off at Harbor Truck Stop for fuel. We have a bunch of other vendors. We have an insurance provider now that's solely for small fleets. There's a special program through Epic Insurance Brokers. We have registration services.
New
from our-
ventures?
Yeah, this is one of the,
We'll
this
look
is one
into
of
it
the.
because
right,
I've been
yeah.
getting that question a lot.
Right.
Because AB5, it sparked a bunch of like,
If you have driving history,
yeah,
it's going to be, that's what's going to start driving it. And there is the challenge, but they know is if you're just coming in off the street and you're like, I want to be a truck driver and I want to start, it's going to be difficult.
yeah.
Or it's going to be prohibitively expensive. So new ventures will be tough, but if you have a driving history, clean driving record, they'll look at you for sure.
By the way, I heard you got to keep that old license. DMV no longer keeps a record of, your old, that's going to be your experience, that license.
Man, yeah.
So now the new issue, that's your experience that day. That's what I heard. So we got to look into that, guys. So,
Definitely. Knowledge is, helpful. It can be confusing, but, this is going to create a whole new type of business person down here in LA Long Beach for the small fleets, between AB5, between the Clean Trucks rule. For folks who want to maintain their independence, there's a lot of steps that are going to take. It's going to cost extra money compared to what everyone was normally used to as a leased on owner op.
Well, hopefully the reward matches the,
Ideally,
Yeah.
supply and demand, drivers are in the driver's seat. This cargo does not move without drivers in this industry. And like I said, sign up for the TAP at Harbor Truckers. We disseminate information all the time out there. Plus, it's a good way to kind of reach out. We have several hundred owner-operators, small fleets, rather, in the system right now. So we are more than willing to come and talk to, other firms with their drivers. I've done it many, many times.
All right.
So we'll look at something. We'll get something on the books, and we'll make it happen, man.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.
Right on. Thanks, Louise.